Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our worship, and a warm welcome to those who are joining us today by Zoom. It's good to be back here in Newcastle leading your service once again, and thank you for inviting me. I can hardly believe that we're already nearly halfway through this year. Summer is already well established, and some of the days we've experienced recently have been positively Mediterranean, especially when felt at their hottest. Everywhere we look is blossoming riotously. So let's rejoice in nature, in her new life, and in the beauty she brings to our senses. Our theme today is what we value most, which was inspired by a modest booklet given to me a few years ago by the Reverend Peter Hewis, who compiled it over several years from 2013 onwards. The booklet, entitled The Things We Value, contains 20 articles and was originally sold to raise funds for the Send a Child to Hucklow charity. Peter was born in Bolton, where we are living now, and he's now a retired Unitarian minister, lives in rural Oxfordshire and attends Oxford Unitarian Chapel. Prior to his retirement, Peter spent 29 years as minister at Hinckley in Leicestershire, and after that he became the chaplain at Harris Manchester College, Oxford, where some of the ministerial training takes place. His articles were inspired mainly by his congregations in Bethnal Green, Hinckley and Oxford, but he also included ideas and contributions from friends whom he describes as just ordinary people. The finished brochure contains varied and interesting pieces which are thought-provoking and encouraging in that they allow space and opportunity for all readers to compile their own lists of what they most value, which may be similar to the booklets or entirely different from everything in them. No matter which, all ideas are valid and welcome, a point which recurs throughout the articles. And now I'm going to light our chalice candle and then read our chalice words, which today were written by Thomas Traherne and interpreted by Peter Hewis. A little more about Thomas later. This is where I begin to think I haven't got enough points. So our chalice candle is lit as a reminder of the freedom of our faith. There we go. And then I can proceed to read the chalice words. It's a piece called Valuable Things. Thomas Traherne, the 17th century poet and mystic, pondered about what things held the highest value. He first thought of rubies, diamonds and pearls, but then he realised that most people couldn't afford such items. Next, he thought that things that are common to all of us, air, light, heaven and earth, sun and water, human beings. He then concluded, I saw clearly that there was a real valuableness in all the common things. In what was scarce, the appreciation had to be more feigned. And Peter Hewis comments, what is valuable to you? Our lists will vary according to our experience of life. While I was serving a small church for a month at North Hackley in Canada, the members of the church made a list. A medical doctor, aged 96, brought 2 poems on growing old, for he felt that his long and healthy life was of value. His wife spoke next of the friendship they had found in the small church community group. A blind poet told us of the joy he found in Braille books, and then the secretary, who disliked public speaking, showed us some beautiful natural objects called concretions, a little bit like fossils, and we looked at them in amazement. At Bethnal Green in East London, a group of people included a painting by John Constable, music by Smetana, and a mosaic by Henry Holland depicting neighbourliness. Others would willingly have brought photographs of grandchildren, weddings and family events, all of value to them. And some people were too shy to speak their deepest thoughts. A girl of 6 included the lollipop lady in her list because the lady made sure that as the little girl crossed the road, no vehicle ran her over. And one person wrote to me and said that her false teeth were of great value to her. More than 2,000 years ago, the writer of Matthew's Gospel in the New Testament compared expensive clothing and so-called treasure with the beauty of the natural lilies. And then he wrote, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." Traherne made his list. We can compile our own, and while we shall find much in common, we shall also find much variety. But that's life. One thing is certain in my mind: items of real value won't cost as much in the way of money. That hymn, and quite a few of the others that follow are similar, reminds us of what there is or what there might be in our lives of value and what we would miss if we didn't have some of those items. And it gives us perhaps a starting point for our own thoughts. So let's now enter into a time of prayer. The love of my Lord is the essence of all that I love here on earth. All the beauty I see, he has given to me, and his giving is gentle as silence. Every day, every hour, every moment has been blessed by the strength of his love. At the turn of each tide, he is there at my side, and his touch is as gentle as silence. There are times when I turn from his presence as I walk other paths, other ways, but I've called on his name in the dark of my shame, and his mercy was gentle as silence. Love all God's creation, both the whole and every grain of sand in it. Love every leaf, every ray of life. Love the animals, love the plants, love every kind of thing. If you love each fragment, then everywhere God's mystery will reveal itself to you. Once you perceive it, you will begin to understand it ever more deeply with each passing day. And finally, you will be able to love the whole world with an all-embracing, universal love. Love and life are precious gifts. The world is beautiful, and we are privileged to live in it. May we know this as truth, and what we know as truth, may we exhibit in our lives. Amen. Now, our first reading, as are all the readings today, is one by Peter Hewis. And this first one is called A Joy Forever. I enjoy the Lake District for its sense of peace, solitude, and natural beauty. But many families enjoy the beach Blackpool or a holiday by a Spanish beach, where children are catered for. John Constable was once painting a horse when a lady told him he was wasting his time on such an ugly creature. Constable replied that the ugliness was in her eyes, for the horse was a noble, majestic animal. Constable represented the grandeur of the English countryside, and his paintings, to my eyes, are things of beauty. I used to feel that paintings by L.S. Lowry were ugly and childlike, but now I realise that his paintings of the industrial northwest of England have a gaunt reality and a vibrant sense of urgency. I might even have been included in one of them when my father took me to watch Bolton Wanderers at Burnden Park. Now that would be a claim to fame. We might ask if those artists were affected by their own environment and experience. Constable, with his wide knowledge of the pleasant pastoral landscapes of rural Essex and Suffolk. Lowry, with his intimate knowledge of the Greater Manchester area as a rent collector in Salford, or living almost as a recluse in the hills of Mottram in Londonderry. On a visit to the National Gallery, it was a pleasant surprise to discover how many paintings I enjoyed. They ranged from a huge canvas of water lilies by Monet to a small canvas by Houdin, which contained tiny details. Our appreciation of beauty relates to all aspects of life: ornaments, wallpaper, buildings, art galleries, the first painting by a child or grandchild, or the beach at Blackpool. From our kitchen door, we can watch the sunset every night, and each time it is different, but always it seems to be a joy forever. Beauty at first is not necessarily real beauty. As Keats points out, a thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness. And I just want to comment before we move on some of the thoughts that have arisen. So the introductory piece was based on the 17th century poet and mystic Thomas Traherne, and this was what I read as our chalice words, because it defines the reference, what are things of value. Traherne originally considered that what this meant were items which were valuable in monetary terms, such as precious jewels, but he revised his ideas when he realised that the majority of people would not be able to afford such purchases. Instead, he listed free things such as light, water and people, which were reasonably available to everybody. Money is not always all important. The Reverend Peter Hewis began to realise that any group of people asked to compile lists of what they valued would select completely different items according to their personalities and life experiences. Some of the more unusual suggestions Peter received from his congregation members were Braille books, certain people familiar only to individuals for specific reasons, particular pieces of music or artworks which led to enjoyment and or appreciation, and of course, false teeth. Peter was reminded of St. Matthew's words when he expressed a preference for natural attire instead of expensive, elaborate garments, when he contrasted the lilies of the field with Solomon in all his glory, and stated his preference for the former. And that's in Matthew chapter 6, if you want to read it or revisit it. Our first reading, entitled A Joy Forever, concerns people's attitudes to beauty. Perceptions of beauty aren't identical. What one person considers beautiful, another will label ugly. We aren't alike in our ideas or appreciations. We are, after all, Unitarians. Maybe, though, this is a trait which spreads more widely. Our tastes vary considerably, and we all have very different ones. So some of us prefer peaceful, quiet holidays, whilst others choose much livelier places and experiences. However, it must be noted that our tastes may change as our lives and experiences do. People with busy lives may find as they grow older, for example, that restful holidays suit them better than they did previously. One question posed is whether artists are affected by the subjects they paint. Another, was Constable's personality different from Lowry's because of their different environments? Because Constable lived in a rural setting, whilst Lowry was more familiar with the mills and factories of Salford. Peter himself appreciates art and paintings, whether displayed in huge pictures or much smaller ones, whether general scenes are tackled or smaller, much more detailed ones. Again, our tastes vary because of who we are and what we experience. In fact, our favourite artworks may not appeal to us greatly when we first see them, but we grow in our appreciation of them, of their stature and beauty gradually over time. And beauty is, indeed, in the eye of the beholder. Now we come to our second hymn, and I'm going to read the hymn that I chose originally. We couldn't find any music, so I'll just read it, because it's really the words that are more important than the music here. If you want to follow it in your hymn books, it is 205. It's not as it's announced on your order of service. If you can imagine it's being sung to Callum Mann. La 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 la. That's a bit broken. So these are the words to When I See the Little Heather. When I see the purple heather like a gown upon the hill, when I see the lark ascending to the sweetness of its trill, I'm reminded of the mountain and the love that will not cease, of the teacher of God's kingdom and an angel's song of peace. When I see the lake reflecting in its mirror light of day, when I see in April pastures sheep that graze and lambs that play, I'm reminded of the healing on the shores of Galilee and the Lord who is my shepherd, who will lead and comfort me. When I see the pathway winding on and on so far ahead, when I see the river widening as it flows along its bed, I can hear a voice proclaiming, I'm the way, so do not grieve. Peace I give like flowing waters. Do not fear, my peace I leave. And now I return to my papers and read the second reading, which is called False Hopes. It's another one that Peter Hewis has assembled. What are false hopes? John Gay once said that where there is life, there is hope, and that is very true. When the parents of Nigel Hunt took him to a medical specialist, they were advised that he was ineducable because he had an extra chromosome and suffered from Down syndrome. The expert stated that he would be an idiot and that nothing would ever alter that fact. Nigel's father replied, if we accept that view, it will become true. Eventually, through the devotion and dedication of his parents, Nigel was reading by the age of 6. At the age of 17, Nigel composed and typed a book entitled The World of Nigel Hunt. This is a triumph of hope and of the human spirit. Using the form of the diary, he describes how he got lost in London and again in Innsbruck. He describes vividly his school, his love of pop music, and his parents. Then he gives his impression of a visit to the United States. One day he turned on the radio and heard about a rehearsal for the Trooping of the Colour. He dressed, took some money, and went off to London. On his way, he asked a railway porter to telephone his mother to tell her where he was going. I just hope that the message reached her in time for her not to worry about this. Nigel describes the trooping ceremonies superbly. I waited for the band to arrive. I heard a terrific throb and my ears were lifted, and with a biff, biff, bang, the band came along. When they turned the corner, up came their umpas and the miserable trombones and blowed me in the middle of nowhere. What a glorious description that is, especially written by one whom the medical profession had rejected. His father left the book, which was written in 1967, exactly as Nigel had typed it. And for me, that gave the writing added interest, because it shows what people with learning difficulties can achieve when they are given the right encouragement. The expectations of two parents for their son's future turned that hope into reality, and they proved the experts to be wrong. During many years as a governor of a special school in Leicestershire, I saw similar young people triumph over many adversities. False hopes? Not at all, for hope can never be destroyed. And again, just a little commentary on that before we progress. Our second reading, False Hopes, attracted my attention because it contains ideas very close to my heart. If we expect nothing of people for whom we are responsible, as parents or teachers, for example, they will probably not achieve anything. And the opposite is true. If we believe in the saying, where there's life, there's hope, and can give positive encouragement, the results will be rewarding, both to the giver and the receiver. The story of Nigel Hunt born with Down syndrome is an all too common one, that of a child written off very early in life, which must have been an extremely difficult attitude for Nigel's parents to combat. But his parents proved more than equal to the task of supporting their son. They believed in him and refused to accept the specialist's negative diagnosis. It's possible that Nigel's parents didn't realise how much their efforts helped him, at least not at first, but their determination to give Nigel hope and a chance of life really won through. Nigel wrote, illustrated and typed his own book, an amazing achievement in its own right, but moreover, a complete triumph in its communication skills and its vivid description, both of which conveyed his enjoyment of life through his obvious appreciation of what he perceived and celebrated. The book, which was circulated quite deliberately in its original form, just as Nigel had produced it to demonstrate what he was capable of, showed precisely what could be achieved with effort and determination. Nigel's parents are to be complimented on the way they supported their son and encouraged him to do whatever he was able, to the credit of them all. As an aside here, it occurs to me that a somewhat similar situation arose with our younger daughter. As she approached secondary education, we realised that she needed encouragement to proceed in the right direction, and we considered private schooling for her as the best way forward. So we encouraged her to take the entrance examination to Bury Grammar School, which she did eventually attend. Our local education authority disagreed and wrote to tell us that she would be unsuited to grammar school education. She was 9 years old at that. I felt a few years later that I ought to have replied to the education authority to inform them of her 9 grade A's at GCSE level, her A and 3 B's at A level, her 2-1 BA honours in philosophy, and her very successful teaching career with special needs children. I made no further comment except to say that we remain very proud. We'll enter into time of prayer again. Great Spirit, you are the wind that breathes on the sea. You are the wave that sways and splashes upon the shore. You are the creak of the boat as it gently rocks upon the water. You are the beasts of the field as they engage in communing with the earth. You are birds of flight soaring above the cliffs. You are the beam of the sun. You are the plants and the trees. You are the creatures of the jungle. You are the salmon in the water. You are the lake and the plain. You are the discoveries of science. You are the beauty of the written word. You are the noble thought, the finest deed, the light of dawn, the shadow of dusk. You are the moon and the sun. You are life. You are us and we are you. You are this great creation, and in worshipping you, we affirm our devotion to life and to making of it the best that it can ever be. Amen. Out of the 20 articles in the book, I chose a third one to read, and I'm going to do that now. It's called Our Hospital. I am only a little hospital. 3 wards with about 32 beds and lots of outpatients clinics. My older siblings in Leicester and Nuneaton have hundreds of beds and could do many more things. When they built me in 1899, I was paid for by voluntary contributions amounting to a few £100s. In the 1970s, they built the new council offices by my side at a cost of £300,000. Some of the experts said that I should be closed down as uneconomic, difficult to administer, and not in line with modern healthcare techniques. But people said I should stay open because they had built me for the benefit of the town. They saved me from those who would have bulldozed me, and they paid for my new X-ray room. Every one of my beds has been replaced and paid for by the people who love me. All those who work in me seem to like me, and when anything special happens, we all rejoice together. Matron became a grandmother, the dietitian had a baby, and when the deputy matron retired, we had a big party for her. The Burbage Band and the Salvation Army come and play music outside my doors, and then I swell with pride. I like the people of our town, and they like me. As long as they need me and want me, I shall stay. The experts are not always right. I am Hinckley Hospital to the locals, but in the 1970s was known to the experts as Hinckley and District Community Hospital, Leicestershire Area Health Authority, T, South West District, Trent Regional Health Authority, and since then by at least 3 further titles. Today, many community hospitals have to send people to accident and emergency units at larger hospitals, many miles away, because they are no longer allowed to do minor surgery. What a great waste of expertise, money, and time. This piece is quite different in tone from all the others in the booklet. It's written in the first person, as if the hospital itself was writing it, and it personifies what is actually an inanimate object, breathing life into it, so that it becomes almost like a real person. The piece points out all the hospital's advantages, which are modest but familiar to the local people who live nearby. The words refute criticism and offer comfort, traditional values and love to those who are its patients. The hospital's best points are stressed, and as many of the staff and patients live nearby, hospital community life feels neighbourly, comfortable and enjoyable. The needs of users are met, in contrast with the experts' beliefs. So you may ask why I decided to choose the 4 articles that I did. Because they all represent familiar yet different qualities. Qualities and attitudes. Treherne's view would seem to be that best things in life are free, connected with what is natural and available to everyone, even though people wouldn't necessarily choose exactly the same items if they were asked to produce lists. The piece about beauty, especially when linked with art, concerns a variety of tastes, preferences and reactions, even when these change with experience. Nigel Hunt's story centres on the importance of family influence in terms of support, encouragement and perseverance, which lead to unexpected achievement and stimulate hope. The hospital changes from an impersonal building to a place valued for what it offers to the community on account of its comfort, friendliness and usefulness. I don't know what each of you would choose to include in your list, but if there's any item you'd like to share, please let me know after the service. If we were going to participate in a workshop, our list would be compiled and discussed in whatever detail we felt was appropriate, and maybe I could produce a booklet then too. If I had to write a list of my own, I'd place music at the very top. Music is, and always has been, an important part of my life in various ways, and I've enjoyed all the experiences it's brought me. Mind you, my musical career almost came to a standstill before it began. I'd hoped to study the subject at university, but failed my A-level. It seemed as if my university hopes wouldn't materialise at all. But I received a letter advising me that if I chose different subjects, I could be admitted. I had to rethink my aims, but looking back, I realised with hindsight that being obliged to revise my plans had actually done me good. I had to recognise that my talents weren't of the standard they needed to be as far as music to degree level was concerned. In fact, the beginning of the first term was enough to convince me that I wouldn't have survived as much as a couple of weeks. I met and made friends with several music students who told me what they had to do in their courses, and I knew straight away that failing the exam had actually done me a favour. Within a few weeks, I realised that more favours existed than I could have predicted. I discovered that there were several choirs and singing groups that I could join, which I did, and I enjoyed them all. Well, the madrigal group posed something of a problem in that no accompaniment was ever provided, and it was better suited to people with perfect pitch. As I don't have that, I had to wait until we were 4 or 5 notes in before I joined in with each piece. I mimed well though, and I don't think anybody actually noticed. The groups I belonged to were mainly filled by music students who soon became friends, and it wasn't long before we were going to concerts and similar events together. In Sheffield, where I was, the City Hall hosted a concert every weekend, when Friday and Saturday evenings alternated, as did visits from the Halley and the Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestras. As students, if we waited until the day of the concert before buying tickets, we could pay ½ a crown, 12.5 pence today, and sit behind the orchestra, where we could see the brass sections, the timpani, and the conductor, an unusual but interesting view. Since those days, I've joined many different singing groups and attended high numbers of concerts, and I know now that music as a leisure activity was much better suited to me than music in any academic sphere. And there are many people whose hobby is music, who contribute to groups in major ways. One person that I'd like to tell you about briefly is outstandingly special. He's called Graham Helm, and he conducts the 2nd Rossendale Scouts Brass Band, which is composed of children from about 6 upwards. They stay mainly until they leave for university, and some return to play as adults. Graham, you may be surprised to learn, is blind, not from birth, but his sight deteriorated to nothing about 10 years ago. What he contributes to the band is awesome. He has to be escorted to and from his conducting days and handed his microphone whenever he needs it. Other than that, he copes completely on his own. Everything he does and says is lodged in his brain and his memory. The music being played, the link information he needs, and all his anecdotes. What a feat. Not only does he do a superb job of conducting, but he looks after his band and inspires its members to play to the best of their abilities, an extremely high standard indeed. We started off by thinking about what we valued and our different ideas about what exactly that encompasses, whether it's nature, scenery, human attitudes, art, music, people, all vastly different items. What we value or enjoy, treasure, appreciate, cherish, esteem is meaningful to us, however insignificant or unimportant it may seem to others. What matters is what appeals to our tastes, which means that from time to time, our ideas may change, either in trivial or significant ways. Sorry. Peter Hewis shared his ideas with us, and we can adopt the same ones, or choose our own in order to create whatever gives us pleasure. What could be better to endow us all with a little fun and enjoyment, to give us relief from the mundane matters that take up so much of our time and our lives these days? Then all our positive preferences, added together, would form a wonderful picture, without which our worlds would be less interesting and less colourful. Go on, indulge yourselves in whatever you enjoy most. You know it makes sense. Earth was given as a garden, cradle for humanity,
tree of life and tree of knowledge, placed for our discovery. Here was home for all your creatures, born of land and sky and sea, all created in your image, all to live in harmony. Show to us again the garden, where all life glows fresh and free. Gently guide your precious children into full maturity. Teach us how to trust each other, how to use for good our power, how to touch the earth with reverence. Then once more will Eden flower. Bless the earth and all its people. One creation, make us whole, interwoven, all connected, planet-wide and inmost soul. Hopeful nature, life bestowing, bid our waste and warfare cease. Fill us all with grace o'erflowing. Teach us how to live in peace. Amen.